guess we can, everybody, but. Are we on? Yeah. Am I the only one that's on? Are you on? You're on. You're on, Mo. Yeah, okay. All right, let's go ahead and start the Academic Achievement Committee meeting. We'll start with public comment. I do want to make a statement about public comment. I want to, in this committee meeting, to make public comment a chance to actually create discussion and dialogue with each other. And so I want to make public comment comfortable for everybody involved, everybody in the room and everybody watching. And so I think it's very important that we, that's just the assumption. I've worked very hard over the years, and I know that my colleagues agree with the value of public comment. So with that said, you know, if there's charges that need to be made, they need to be made. You know, obviously I'm not restricting, I'm not telling people what to say in public comment, but I am saying that we're not going to have a very fruitful discussion if charges are made, especially charges that, you know, lead to whatever. We're trying to have a discussion here, and I want to actually make sure that this happens so we can get some stuff worked. And so making public comment safe for everybody is very important. And I'm in no way suggesting that people should limit what they have to say if they think something's important, but if public comment leads to cutting off dialogue, then it obviously is not serving its purpose. With that said, is there any public comment for today? Okay, no public comment. Before we go on to instructional council update, we have had a, in terms of starting time, Mr. Ross had a previously scheduled commitment that didn't allow us to start until 4:15. I wanted to just see if people would like to go ahead and move the meeting starting time back to 4. If that's a problem for anybody, does that work for me?
Works for me.
Okay, so if we can make a note that, and hopefully at least the chair will remember that we made this change, so that our next meeting will be at 4 o'clock and rather than 4:15. Okay, so we'll start with the reports to the committee, which, oh, actually, we're going to start with instructional council update. Come on up, Cindy. Sorry.
That's all right. All right. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
See you, all of you. Instructional council met last month on April 16th at Staff Development Center. The curriculum update was provided by our ELA curriculum supervisor, Roseanne Wall, and it was around the implementation of the Reedy Street series. Was the conversation that we had. Instructional council has requested an implementation progress report to be provided at the May 16th meeting around the implementation of Reading Street. This was a major elementary level initiative during the 11-12 school year, and an update will be provided by the curriculum team representative to inform the council on the strengths and struggles of implementation over the course of the last 2 years. A city high school or city middle high school administrator returned to the instructional council to share a proposed syllabus for a new course in the fall. The course actually combines 2 formerly independent activities that the city had called Extended Essay and Creativity, Action, and Service, and it will combine those into one full year course taken over 2 semesters, 1 semester of the junior year and 1 semester of the senior year. The course is designed to support IB students in the completion of some IB required activities. It is an elective credit course with options for students to opt out as is appropriate for individual students. The name of the course has not been settled on, though IB research strategies has been suggested. So that's in the works. Then City Middle High School Administrator also provided information to the Instructional Council about the renaming of middle school courses to include the IB middle year designation. The Previously, middle school courses have not had this designation, and city administration shared the revised titles and syllabi. The syllabi was not revised, it's the same syllabi, but just the revised titles will now follow the IB format, but not change the content of the courses in any way. City also shared syllabi for 3 new high school courses. They're IB diploma year courses, chemistry, physics, and psychology. Discussion of the syllabi was tabled until this week's meeting on May 16th, where they will be reviewed. There were not any subcommittee updates, but an ad hoc committee will convene, or actually did convene last week, to review meeting minutes, and that took place on May 9th at staff development. And the next instructional council meeting is scheduled for May 16th, this week, at 1 o'clock at staff development. Right?
Looking forward to hearing about the Reading Street series. I know that was a major investment a couple of years ago, so see how that went.
All right.
So, good.
Thank you so much.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, are we allowed to sit in the staff development meetings as board members?
The instructional council,
Yeah.
are we? See any reason?
They're open meetings,
Yeah,
yes.
so,
They're open meetings?
Sure.
yeah.
So 1 o'clock this week. And then the final meeting of the year is May 30th.
But, excuse me, I want to check, because it's a staff meeting, it's not a board, open public meeting, it is a staff meeting. And so I need to check to see if
Okay.
that's.
Good. Thank you.
Right, yeah, it's not a, yeah, it's a staff, it's administrative and teaching staff, okay.
I just want to listen. Just want to know if we're allowed to go.
Okay. So we can check with, we'll check with Sharon later after the meeting about how that goes, okay? All right, thanks. All right, our first report is the Learning Corner evaluation. So, and if you guys could just give us some background on what the Learning Corner is, what it is, when it was created, and why, would be good.
Sure, I think I can probably cover that in my presentation. I'm Walter DeBoer, for the record. Everybody here knows Kurt Johnson. Sure. And what I'm presenting today is just a brief summary of the evaluation that we did in 2011, 2012 of the first year of Learning Center. And this is, I think, the second in a series of evaluation reports I'm going to be presenting to the committee. And my understanding is that the committee is looking for executive summaries unless otherwise
Right.
stipulated.
Right.
So you're looking for something brief and to the point. And typically what I do with an executive summary is just take the regular evaluation report, which you have, and take out all the findings and appendices. So basically it's the introduction and the background, that sort of stuff, the methodology, and then maybe a summary of the findings. So that's what I'll be doing today, just taking you through that. So I would like to start with page 1 with the introduction. I just kind of briefly take you through that. So this program was started in the fall of 2011. It's a partnership with Grand Rapids Community College. It was a brand new program and was designed to kind of re-engage students who have been disengaged from learning for some period of time. So those students who had either dropped out of school or been somehow disengaged, to get them back into the learning environment and to offer them lots of options for accessing learning and also participating in even the college level courses. So that was the thinking behind it. The program, as I mentioned, offers opportunity for accelerated high school completion and the ability to take from 3 to 9 credit hours of college level courses. Students can experience work-based learning and or participate in community service projects that are connected to the curriculum. The instruction is accessed through E2020 and delivered in content areas that are required to meet the Michigan Merit Curriculum and the GRPS Board of Education high school completion requirements. As mentioned earlier, the program offers students flexible scheduling, integrated transitional programming to college, and other supplemental college readiness experiences. The goals of the program are listed on the bottom of page 1. I won't read those, you can see them. But the goal of the evaluation is to eventually determine to what extent was the program successful in meeting all of those objectives. I added a piece on the top of page 2 that deals with program challenges and barriers. I think it's important for the reader to know that there were a number of challenges the program faced when it began in the late summer of 2011. Because it started and came together late, it faced a number of challenges. For example, the program had to rely on the use of substitute teachers for much of the fall semester. And in fact, full staffing was not achieved until January of 2012. This late and incremental hiring of staff created challenges for professional development. It also took longer than expected to obtain and fully implement the computer lab. So for much of the fall semester, students had to access E2020 using laptops. Student interest in the program was actually higher than they had anticipated. And although the program was designed to attract students, as I mentioned, who had dropped out and given up on school, many of the students who applied were actually currently enrolled in a GRPS high school, but wanted to participate in a smaller school that offered more flexible programming. Some students indicated that they attended this program because they did not meet the admission criteria for other schools. Another challenge was that the program, because E2020 content can be accessed anywhere and frequently is accessed off-site, it's difficult to measure daily attendance. So a lot of students were indicated as absent, even though they actually may have been accessing content off-site. So that was an additional challenge. So the purpose of this study, as with all evaluations, is to provide periodic feedback to program directors and administrators on what's working with the program and where some of the challenges were, where the program has fallen short on its goals and objectives. Because this is a 5-year implementation, the evaluation design typically follows kind of a transitional movement from initially focusing on more formative aspects of the program and then moving toward more summative aspects, looking at what kind of outcomes were achieved and to what extent the program achieved its stated goals and objectives. So the questions to be addressed in the evaluation are listed there in the beginning on the bottom page 2, going into page 3. Again, I won't read those. You can read those for yourself and maybe even have already. And on the bottom of page 3, just a brief description of the methodology that was used to gather the data that's summarized in the report. So with that, then I'll just go back to almost the beginning, right after the table of contents, which is just a bullet-pointed summary of some of the key findings. We found that a total of 109 students enrolled at Grand Rapids Learning Center at some point during the 2011-2012 school year, and of these, 77 were still enrolled at year end. The total number of days enrolled for each student ranged from 3 days to 176 days, with a mean average of 113 days. Now, the Michigan Department of Education granted an instructional waiver allowing Learning Center to operate a minimum of 878.4 hours instead of 1,098, and this translates to a school year of 146 days. I want to say that because the total number of days enrolled exceeded 146 for some Learning Center students, and that was because they either started or ended the year at a school other than Learning Center. Most of the 109 students had been enrolled in a GRPS school during the 2010-11 school year, in other words, the previous school year. However, 36 had no GRPS enrollment record from 2010-11 and likely came from a non-GRPS school. 61% of the enrollees were female, 39% were male, 59% were African American, 17% white, 17% Hispanic, and 85% qualified for a free or reduced price meal. Enrollments by grade level were fairly evenly distributed across all 4 grades. A total of 564 courses were attempted via E2020. Most of these were English and algebra courses, in other words, the basics. The large majority of students, 73%, attempted a total of 3 credits, which is 6 courses or fewer. Students could retake any course they failed to complete during a marking period. 42% of all Learning Corner students earned no course credit during the 2011-2012 school year. 10 students, or 9%, earned more than 2 credits for 4 courses. Over half, 51% of all courses attempted resulted in a failed grade, while an additional 19% resulted in an incomplete grade. A course showing 85% to 90% completion would be marked as an incomplete, but could be finished after the school year ended. 30% of courses attempted resulted in earned credit. So that's just kind of a brief summary of the findings for year 1. Again, the focus in this initial year was on some formative aspects of it. Typically what we do in these presentations, we have program directors, in other words, those who are most directly responsible for the program, also attend. So Kurt is here not to provide a rebuttal of the evaluation, but because so much time has passed since this report was done, just going to give you an update on what the program has accomplished this year and where we're at, and maybe address any questions that you might have. So, Kurt?
I don't want to kind of recant everything that Dr. DeBoer had just mentioned, but in the format, the document that we received that asked us to clarification for the problems, provide an overview and background on the topics and recommendations and budget implications and policy contractual implications, kind of provided some responses to some of the challenges that we had in launching the program. And as you heard, that we spent the first semester basically without permanent staff. We didn't receive permanent staff until going into the second semester. We had an issue with the technology didn't arrive until about 3.5 weeks after the school year had started, so that was a challenge there. And then we were working with SIS in terms of how to capture attendance more accurately in terms of getting students credit for the seat time, because some of the students who were participating in the dual enrollment experience, their dual enrollment classes overlapped into their regular school time schedule, but then they were able to still access their E2020 courses, but because they were not physically sitting in the seat, that did not always reflect in capturing the attendance there. We also are in discussion about how to staff it in terms of administrative oversight, so the administrator can really build and grow the program as it was designed there. The other piece, I want to just kind of jump down to the policy and contractual implications. We're looking at, because these students who had dropped out of school, and we have a profile of the students we serve, and a lot of them are sole supporting students living independently. Some are parenting, full-time jobs, and those sort of things. And so this program worked in terms of their lifestyle and was flexible enough to achieve that. But also, they were a little older in age. And so we wanted to look at how we could benefit from what the state allows for students who are 19 years old and older who complete the Michigan Merit curriculum would be eligible for high school diploma. And also look at how our current Board of Education graduation requirements that are above and beyond the Michigan Merit curriculum requirements, if we could take a look and have discussion about how that could better serve some students in those situations. As you all know, prior to Michigan Merit curriculum, the only state graduation requirement was a half credit of government. And then when the 2006-07 year, those things were implemented, we became one of the states that had some of the highest graduation standards in the nation, not just the region, but the nation. And so looking at those standards that are set pretty high, with the 4 years of English, 4 years of math, and type of math courses and those sort of things, those additional requirements that the Board of Education are requiring above and beyond that may put some students at a further finish line for graduation than when they originally started. Like I said, most of these students don't have the luxury of 9th and 10th grade anymore. They're 18, 19, turning 20. So we're looking at how do we get them eligible for a diploma and then fold them over into the dual enrollment experience and then transition them into a fully integrated college experience. And I want to kind of just summarize where we were this year at this point in time. We have total courses completed in the program is 155. The average overall grade point average in the program is 76%, which is a C. We're currently at 30 students in terms of enrollment right now. Average daily attendance is at 70%. The total number of students that are in dual enrolled experiences is 16 for the school year, and then 4 that are scheduled to go this summer, so a total of 20 there. The number of dual enrolled classes were 17, and the number of college credits that have been earned to date this school year has been 53 college credits, and their average GPA in the dual enrolled class is 2.05. We currently have 7 students who have met graduation requirements at this point, and we have 8 possible more students that may meet graduation requirements by the end of the school year.
Go questions?
I have a question, yes. First of all, I like the way you put in this pamphlet, programs and challenges for the barriers that are set in place. I think that's good. But I want to ask a question, and the question I want to ask is, with a program that was put in place like this, what was the reasons for using substitute teachers, and why weren't regular teachers hired for this program?
There was just some challenges in the staffing process at that point in time. You know, the positions were posted. So I can, really speak to actually some of the nuts and bolts of, why staff did not get placed. I just know that we had the positions, posted, I think, prior to the start of the school year, and there was just some challenges with getting them filled. Interviewing, there was interest in the positions, but there was just some sort of staffing challenges that I cannot explain in terms of why it took so long.
Wasn't it a late start too?
We were ready to open by the first day of school.
It was planning during the summer, wasn't it?
It was a very quick turnaround. To elaborate on Dr. Baker's question, we were in discussions the spring prior, April 2011, with GRCC about a middle college program. And the middle college, meaning the students would be in high school and college at the same time, so when they finished, they would have a high school diploma and an Associates of Arts degree at that time. And there was a more immediate need that the college wanted to get involved with the school district at that time. And they had mentioned at a particular meeting that there was the Learning Corner building on Wealthy and Fuller that did GED in the evening, but it was vacant during the day, and they said, well, is there an opportunity to collaborate on something where we could have some programming for that community, that area, during those school hours? And so they asked me to stop by and meet the director, who was David Selman at the time, and had some discussions with him about that. And we talked about, trying to meet a need of a student population who, like I said, students who had left school for 6 months or more and didn't feel comfortable going back into the environment from which they left. And so we thought we could sit down and create a new environment that they would be inspired by, completing high school in a college setting and being so closely connected to college. And so we kind of mapped out, how the program would exist or come into operations, and giving these students an opportunity to complete high school, but then also get them on the fast track to dual enrollment, and then on to other post-secondary opportunities. And so it was a 90-day kind of turnaround from like June 1st to September 1st to getting this, all the structures in place, getting a new school code from the state, getting, a very, very, very quick turnaround there. But we had the structures in place, but some of the other components, were not in total synchronization at that time. So like I said, such as the, technology and the staffing there. And so that's why we had to start the year, because students had signed up. They were ready. They were there first day, and we didn't want to say, no, go home and wait until, other things arrived.
Would that be the cause of some of the students who did not finish the program? Like you got 109 that enrolled, and you end up with only 77, which means maybe 32 students dropped off somewhere. Could that be the problem as well, too?
That would have an impact on it. And then, a combination of a few things, that would have an impact on it. And then also students realize that sometimes, as we say, the honeymoon period is over, that they really had to do work to stay in the program. And then others, online is not for everybody. It's some students it works well for, and some students demonstrated that level of autonomy and assistance from the classroom teacher worked well for them. And so as students kind of got a feel for how this program operated, some decided to say, I need a different type of program. So, but the late staffing is a major implication in terms of starting any program anywhere. If you don't have your frontline soldiers, at the beginning of the war, that could be problematic.
Thank you.
So there are 30 students in the program this year currently. So is that a better number, or is it you expect it to be larger and just isn't?
The number is more tailored to these type of students that we were trying to recruit. In the beginning, you heard in the executive summary, there was a lot of high interest. We were targeting students who had at least sophomore credits. Sophomore credits, an 8th grade reading level. You know, and we judged that by having a passing grade in 9th grade English. And so, so we got a lot of students who didn't meet that criteria. They did not have sophomore credits, did not have at least an 8th grade reading level. So, but we wanted to try to accommodate them because of the response and because of the interest was so large. But we were not able to fully serve them because of how the program was designed. I said, you know, coming in with sophomore credits give you a better chance at launching into that dual enrollment experience sooner versus later. So that's our outcomes now are a little closer to the quality outcomes that we targeted in the very beginning, because of the students there have all of the recruiting criteria, if you will, that we were looking for in the very beginning.
So how many students, I mean, so next year, what are you, is this something that you want 100 students at? Is it going to be a small niche program for 30 students, or?
The program we could grow the program, we would have to make a determination what the staffing looks like, you know. Looking at how do we assign a leadership down there that can build and grow the program. If we, make a decision about what that leadership looks like and how that, comes into play, then the college is willing to grow the program as large as we feel we can, accommodate it. So, but we have access to 2 classrooms down there, actually 3, because one is a tutoring lab, but 3 classrooms, each one have space for 25 students. So in theory, if we want to grow it to 75 students in the day, and there could be a different 75 students in the evening because of the instructional waiver, there could be, in theory, 150 students in that program. Like I said, we would have to really look at what the staffing structure would be to accommodate and be with those students.
So is there discussion about what the goals are for that to look like next year?
We're going to be entering into some discussions in terms of where we would like the program, and we will talk with Mrs. Neal and in terms of what her vision is for this experience. I've heard that other school districts are interested in partnering with GRCC in a similar fashion with this type of model. So we would have to, make a decision in terms of where we want to be in that scenario.
Let's have one more quick question. Just, I'm just still trying to get a sense of what is it becoming? I mean, I think that you have ideas about what something is going to be, and then it becomes something. Is it becoming a middle college program? Is it becoming kind of a niche alternative school for kids that just have, more difficulties? Or is it becoming something entirely different?
It would probably be more the second point that you made, more of a niche alternative ed program that works for a certain student population. Particular, it's not a middle college. It had some middle college elements to it because students could excel on the dual enrollment piece and really accumulate enough college credits to really achieve an associate's arts degree, depending on how, like I said, aggressive they would do that. But it's really, like I said, for students who left the high school experience, lifetime interruptions, whatever those are, and then they realize that, and in order to enhance the quality of their life, education is critical. And so how do they do that, not be embarrassed of going back to their regular high school, maybe not feeling welcome at their old high school, but a setting that allows them to do the high school piece, but then also, because the college has done an excellent job in terms of viewing these students as college students, while they're on their campus. First class, royal class, red carpet treatment to these high school students, but they view them as, college students. The kids kind of blend right into the environment, and so it's, I think, more of a niche program for a certain group of students who are really trying to achieve the high school piece and get into post-secondary education.
That sounds like that makes sense as a small program that we're trying to, for kids that aren't going to be fulfilled anyway. And so so that gives us something to actually decide if that's what, if that's what we want to do, is that, instead of trying to be something else. Is this something that does then seem different than, say, an alternative school, our other alternative schools, right? So that wouldn't work for these kids either.
It depends on, like I said, it depends on what the student is really trying to achieve, and we try to really put that opportunity in front of them. Okay. And what we really push on them is the need for post-secondary education. Right. So that becomes almost a non-negotiable for them, because we do introduce them to the CLS 100 course, which is the first dual enrollment class that they take. And so they are coming to it knowing that this is just not a high school experience. It's a high school and college experience that I have to commit to. And most of them are doing relatively well, especially this year versus last year when we had, just trying to accommodate interest.
Okay. Yeah, just to sort of, I guess, support some of the things that Kirk's saying, the turning point is actually kind of what it's called, and that happens to be in the same building in which I'm housed in. So I do have a chance to observe these students a lot, and like you said, they do just kind of blend right in. It's really been, and I've talked to a lot of them individually. I've even just asked them candidly, how do you like this program? The good and the bad, and in general, those students are probably just a step different than a traditional alternative student, that they are probably a little more motivated. Okay. They do kind of have a little more long-term vision, and it's, and they understand that they're in a college environment and they behave accordingly. And it's, really, it's like you said, from a standpoint of an employee at a college, there definitely is a seamless sort of mix with them and everyone else. So it seems to be working pretty good, though, really. Good. I think actually that was a big piece. This school year was the first year they actually moved onto the college campus. Prior to, as Dr. DeBoer said, it was at the Learning Corner on Wealthy and Fuller. Right. But beginning this school year, they began to do everything down on the campus. So they're not at the Learning Corner anymore?
No. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that. There was a move. There was an address change. We are, again, like I said, GRCC has rolled out the red carpet in terms of helping these students take advantage of this opportunity. And because the program is designed to put their mind on post-secondary, we have the opportunity to move right on campus. They have an ID that says Turning Point that the college recognizes. They go to the bookstore like the college students. They go to a lot of the things. They have access to a lot of the things on campus that college students have access to.
Okay. It sounds like what it's become is pretty nice. That's good.
But just for the record, the college has had some conversation about a potential middle college thing with GRPS too, though. Just some superficial conversation at this point, but there is some interest, depending on, obviously, mutual interest, obviously. So,
thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to special ed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
A long-awaited special education update. Jim Polasek, our coordinator for compliance, is going to actually start us off and provide you with an update regarding significant disproportionality, which was the issue that we presented to you last fall.
Right.
As far as steps that have been taken and where we're going with that. And Jim, did you want to use the?
Yeah, if I could, board here.
You need some assistance as far as the
Actually, don't we
screening
have
then?
the slides here, though?
You have a PowerPoint presentation?
We do, but the public won't see it as well.
Thank you, Dana.
Do you care? You weren't on the committee, Paul, were you? Were you on this committee? When we did this last time.
While Jim is getting us set up, we do need to inform you that the district has been notified that based on our discipline data from school year 2011-2012, we continue to show significant disproportionality of African-American students with IEPs in regards to discipline, suspension, and expulsion. So Jim will be putting together a team that will be going to Lansing on May 31, and they'll be learning about the implications, which includes ensuring that we spend 15% of our IDEA flow-through dollars on comprehensive early intervening services, which is actually what thus far has been funding our PBIS. And then when they come back from Lansing, we'll talk about how that might look for next year and what other projects the district may take on. The intent is to reduce the number of students that are referred for special education. That's why it's called early intervening services. And they encourage us to use it primarily with early elementary, but the districts do have full, we can choose whatever projects or whatever positions we may want to take on. It's not restricted to just early intervention, early grades.
So a couple questions. So there are two things. The disproportionality is one, students, black males being referred to special ed.
Not males. It's
Okay,
not about gender.
I thought that's, okay, excuse me. So, black students being referred to special ed, and then also
No.
the suspension
Let
issue?
me back up. The reason we have been identified with significant disproportionality is for the discipline of African-American students with IEPs.
Okay,
And not
okay.
about our
All right.
rate of referrals or identification
Okay.
of students that are African-American.
But the early intervention piece is for students who are not yet in
Exactly.
special-
Those,
okay.
that 15% cannot be used for students that are already identified for special
Okay.
education. It must be used in general education as an early intervening system
Okay,
to try and prevent students from being referred to special ed by providing services early on, front-loading, if you will.
gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry Cedar. I'm Jim Plasek, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of our process. We've set up a team, the special ed administrators meet monthly within the buildings, made up of a variety of staff members within the building to look and review suspension data, and then basically compile a report that then is sent to me, and I review it. And then we take a look at what types of interventions and strategies that we're going to move forward on, what we're seeing in the data. And as we see, when we looked over all our monthly data for the past year that we've been doing it, we've noticed that the district's top 3 offenses for students with IEPs rated, first of all, disruptive behaviors, had the highest percentage, disobedience of school rules, and then fights. There were other offenses that I did not bring to the table today, but those were the major 3 that we really focused on that showed a high percentage. Looking at trends of our data overall, and it's a brief overview, I didn't get into the percentages and stats. Looking at the disruptive behaviors, we've been noticing that the data is revealing predominantly black and Hispanic males, and we're noticing it in the grades 6th through 9th. That the suspensions are occurring for disruptive behaviors.
Can I ask just a quick question?
Yeah.
So when they say predominantly black and Hispanic, what are you basing that on? Is that based on a percentage of the student population?
Yes, based on the data of the overall percentage
So
of the
rate at-
population.
So the rate at which black and Hispanic males are being
Correct,
disruptive is greater than their numbers compared to white?
correct, yes.
And if I could restate that,
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
because
restate that.
they're not necessarily, they're being identified as exhibiting disruptive behaviors
right, correct.
by school personnel at a higher rate than other groups.
Okay, okay.
There's a nuance there,
Yeah.
right?
Thank you.
Be perceived,
Yes.
Exactly.
they are,
Not necessarily.
but that's what you're saying.
No, I'm just saying,
People,
not
people
necessarily.
assume.
Yeah, I got you.
Is there any information that you have written that says that in your report elsewhere?
Not in this, I just was gonna give a brief overview, but if you want me to break it down, I can desegregate the data and bring it into you on the percentages in there.
I would appreciate it.
The other thing that we've been discussing is that disruptive behaviors is a large catch-all, and much of that is in the eye of the beholder as to how one individual student might exhibit that disruptive behavior, and then how the adult deals with it versus another student.
And that's in the trends that we're seeing in disobedience of school rules, the same thing. We notice that basically, again, it's the factors of predominantly black and Hispanic males, and we're noticing a high occurrence at the 9th grade level. And I can, bring that data to you and show you the findings that we review the data.
Is this data based off of this academic year or this current year?
No, this current year.
This is this current year.
Yes,
Okay,
this
not
current year.
So what you referred to earlier. Okay.
That is correct. And the third category was, again, fights, and you can see from it again that the black and Hispanic males are being looked at as high data, and grades 6 through 9, and one of the outliers was 3rd grade, who had a high percentage of fights occurring within those grade levels.
Okay, I realize this is a summary, and because we have other things, we can have actually, we should just have this plan to have a full report, just get the full report and just do this at a later date, so we can delve into it more deeply. 'Cause I
That's
think
great.
It sounds like the committee would be interested in that.
Okay.
But so, I do have such, because it's come up all of this time, so it's grades 6 through 9, so this is happening at which schools then? So it's not just, it's happening at K-8 schools, it's happening at middle schools, it's happening at 9th graders in high schools, where is?
Most of the last report was seen mostly at the high schools.
So the 9th graders.
That
So
ninth
this is
grade
the
that
9th graders that are in high school.
Correct.
So why is it that stops? I mean, if it's a disproportionality in 9th grade, why isn't it in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade?
Looking at the data, I just basically looked at the target areas of the high things that stood out in the trends. I mean, the pattern's going across 10th, 11th, 12th, but not as highly as I noticed in the 9th grade data. So I wanted to pinpoint that I seen that we need to take a look at what's occurring with those 9th graders and what we can do to start making sure it doesn't continue into 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
You're seeing the data, but you don't know the reasons why. I mean, that's what you
That-
have to explore as to why.
Exactly, that's what we need to dive deeper into and explore and,
That would be.
and
Have you, yeah, that is obviously a big piece.
Yes.
But, and I'll give you a Snicker bar if you can answer why, that'd be great. But have you noticed the difference between, 6th, 7th, and 8th in K-8 versus 6th, 7th, and 8th in middle schools, as far as, the data's concerned?
I'd have to, and I can pull that data for you, I'd have to look, I'm not seeing it in the lower K through 5 setting, I'm seeing it like in the K-8 settings and in the middle schools.
Okay, yeah, I'd just be
And
curious.
to then determine, between middle school and the K-8, I would have to go back to my data
Yeah,
and then
I
pinpoint it.
think that might be, we'd like to, before we
Right.
respond to that, I think,
Yeah.
because we do have a list of the schools, and we
I
can
do,
readily
and I didn't put them up now.
tell by percentages, and as I remember looking at the data, we did have more, like, the comprehensive middle schools tended to have a higher level of percentage of students being suspended or expelled versus students in K-8.
Right, okay. Okay, so that's,
So as the students probably go higher, you're probably 10th, 11th, 12th graders who are probably, in this analysis, are probably no longer in school. That could be a reason why.
well, that's what I want to know, because, so the consequence of the 9th grade suspension
quite leave
is no
9th
10th
grade.
grade. And so we gotta fix that.
Right,
Okay.
Yeah.
that's where they're going.
I was
away.
assuming it wasn't because they just,
Stop misbehaving.
No.
or being perceived as misleading.
Being Christian.
So, right, I mean, so we got, so that's,
That's
you know,
important information.
Would you like me to continue?
yes,
or-
yeah.
And basically, looking as the teams were finding, they were noticing that their findings on analysis showing that misinterpretation of behaviors, that the students were believing that they were behaving well, but the adults were perceiving it differently, that they were behaving inappropriately. So some of the team interventions could be group versus individual teaching of those expectations, to revisiting expectation alignment with culture and understanding, and reteaching with precision and fluency.
Very good.
Other analysis out of our reports, overlooking the monthly reports, we notice a reinforcement for inappropriate behavior. Students behave inappropriately due to rewards from peers, social praise for deviant behavior. Some possible interventions, again possible, I mean there's a whole range. There's established group contingencies and isolated target students from competing reinforcers from other during instruction we could look at. And another finding, and we know this, it's not new to us, students engage in problems behavior to escape or avoid academic demands. We're noticing students are finds instruction aversive and misbehave to avoid the work. Some possible interventions would be to look at improving instruction to address academic deficit areas and to provide instruction matched to the students' needs and their levels of success. That was some of the findings, overall findings that the monthly reports were revealing. Looking at some possible target solutions, we do have a school-wide information system, SWIS, to collect and report this disproportionality. And we have the data system, but we feel we have not taught people enough how to use the data. And Skiba quoted this, that disciplinary outcome data should be disaggregated in order to explicitly evaluate whether an intervention is equally effective for all racial and ethnic groups. So basically we're looking at these findings through this collection of data. And some other strategies that we need to look at is to target schools with high suspension rates, and within those schools to strengthen the following. PBIS, the Special Ed RAP Team Disciplinary Data Review monthly to really dive deeper and roll up our sleeves to see what's going on. Professional development target to reduce suspension, looking at culture competency, and looking at the model of restorative justice. And like Teresa said, on May 31st, the team, myself, with some building administrators and special ed administrators will be attending a meeting in Lansing with Dr. Eleanor White regarding this topic.
Which topic, when you say this topic?
Significant disproportionality
Okay.
topic we're going to be
Just
meeting on.
the whole deal.
Yes,
Oh.
the whole thing.
You mentioned culture. Were you referring to the students' culture or the teachers' culture, or both?
Both.
And how about in terms of those students' home lives? Is there any data that deals with the behavior at home or anything that's referred to the school?
I didn't look at that data, but that would be an area that we could, take a look at and target within our monthly meetings.
Does that data
Look at that
exist?
data.
How would you find that? Yeah.
That would be,
Data.
right.
Oh,
Unless you
You
did
went
some-
on an individual basis with kids. I mean, that's
Right,
part of
as
the
a whole-
referral system.
right.
Knowing what's going on. As a group, I don't know.
well, you may have to break it down. Start
by kid.
individually, yeah. I mean, because
Yeah,
you're looking
kid
at
by
a
kid.
significant number of expulsions, are we not?
Suspensions.
Yes. We're looking at,
I mean, you said significant in your
Yes.
report.
But,
Yeah.
but it's not,
No.
it doesn't really reflect on the number of, what's significant is the disproportionality between racial ethnic groups. That's what's significant, not necessarily the number. That's not what the state or the feds are looking at. They're really looking at, are we, as a district, suspending and expelling in a proportionate way? They're not gonna challenge that students were or were not, as long as it's done in a proportionate manner. Dr. Eleanor White, the current special ed director for Office of Special Education would say that this is really an adult issue, an adult problem, and not necessarily a student problem. It's, again, how adults are reacting or responding to student behaviors that causes a particular racial or ethnic group to be overly suspended and overly expelled than other racial ethnic groups.
Okay. Now, I don't know, Dr. White, I just off the cuff, I may challenge just a blanket statement and say that it's an adult issue, although I understand perception obviously is an adult issue, but I think there's a reality here that, you know, that maybe me being a former, you know, troubled black teen, maybe I'm more comfortable saying, but there is a reality that our black boys in particular at the schools that I'm in, my perception as well is that they disproportionately are disruptive, disproportionately defy school rules, disproportionately do all the things that you listed. Now again, that may just be the adult in me that perceives that. But again, as a practitioner and as one that's, I guess, feels rather comfortable talking about the issue, I think we may do our stuff with disservice if all of our interventions are totally focused on what adults should do differently. I think our interventions should also address what students should do differently, and I guess that goes back to, I guess, just my own belief that to some extent we need to have students at the table, and the table I'm talking about is, and just I guess an example, unintendedly, I've had some group discussion with some students at Ottawa, and this just happened. I'm just over there doing my traditional work at Upward Bound, and a couple young boys in the hallway during class time, so I just challenged them, you know, what's going on, et cetera, and so I just posed two questions to them, you know, do you want a good education? Of course, they say yes. And my second question, well, what's your responsibility to make that happen? And of course, the answer to that question began to talk about the ineptitude of the adults in the building from their perspective. But again, well, it's not about the adults. What is your personal responsibility? And it was actually a rather enriching discussion, so enriching that they actually came back after school to continue the discussion. We had that discussion the next week, and then as the adult, I sort of dropped the ball. And when they see me, when are we going to meet again? When are we going to continue talking about this? But at the same time, the ironic piece is that some of those boys who were really interested in that conversation and who really contributed to that conversation, I walked past a classroom one day, happened to peek in, and there and they're being disruptive. There and they're doing all the things that we're talking about. So I guess what I'm getting at, though, is that they understand what they want long term, but I just don't know if we're doing a sufficient job in allowing them to, I guess, own their personal and collective responsibility in this. And so again, that's maybe will be my challenge to the statement that it's not an adult issue. It's that it's not a child, it's an adult issue. I think it's a dual issue.
What I really like, one of the things I really like about your comments is that having a forum at the student level regarding this issue would be a very, very informative thing that would allow us to kind of get into their brains a little bit and see their perceptions as to this particular problem. That might be something, Jim, for the group to consider.
I really think you also should consider looking at home lifestyles. That's very important. I like what Mr. Ross said. You take an African American or Hispanic male who comes from a home with no father and deals with his mother all day, goes to school 99% of the time. The teacher is a female, and now he has to deal with the female aspect not only at home but at school also. And that could be a big problem as to why you have some behavioral problems as well. So that makes a big difference. So that might be something to look into. And then you have a teacher who comes from, example, who comes from Rockford, who doesn't really understand the culture, has a different background in terms of her or him learning, in terms of behavior. You see this kind of child who's disruptive, automatically you tag him or her as disruptive all the time, when all they really are asking for is some help, some kind of way.
I have one too. I know we're talking about special ed, But it seems to me that it's not just special ed kids that we're talking about. We're talking about kids at that age, males primarily. I mean, that's what it sounds like. I wonder, I don't know if you've done that to say, is special ed the only one this is happening to, or is it in general, and special ed is just this group that we key in on so much that we don't,
That we're being penalized
you know, that we're always looking at those special ed kids because we've got
It
laws.
happens that this is included in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, so then every state is obligated to report on discipline for students with IEPs. That is not a requirement in the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan does not collect discipline data for non-disabled students.
Right.
So we are not able to.
We don't know that.
We have the data internally, but that data doesn't necessarily leave the district through the Michigan school data system and get reported to Lansing.
So it seems like, you know, we may be looking at special ed, but we're really looking at a bigger issue here. We just don't have all the
Yes.
And
information.
if I can address, we're really talking about two different things. One is, no, you're fine. One is the number of students that we are suspending or expelling. That's one issue. But what this report really is looking at the penalty, that's what we're saying it's an adult issue. The penalty that's given to those students, right? So it isn't just the behavior. It's you're more likely to come down harder
Throw them out.
on students that are of color than you are other students.
Right.
That's the penalty. We have a larger issue with suspending and behavior, right? So we have a larger issue. But for this particular issue, it is the adults, how we penalize the same group of students
Right.
over and over.
But how do you plan to fix that, or can that be fixed?
Yes, it can. We believe that it can and will. We have programs in place for this year and next year. We continue to really focus in on, one, how do we change the penalty? And what does that look like? So instead of throwing someone in the category of disruptive behavior, what exactly are they doing and how can we change that behavior? And then what does the punishment look like? Right? And so instead of you're being disruptive, we put you out for 9 days, or we try to stay under the 10 days. Instead of doing that, we're saying, how do we change that? So we do believe that we can do that. We know that we have to work with staff members so that they understand what to do. We need to give people help. The other thing is looking at straight across the district for suspensions and expulsions. We are looking at that as well. That's where we have restorative justice. We have PBIS. We are bringing social workers next year as part of the plan so that people can gain an understanding. So we are taking it on as a district, but we're also working with the community, because I agree with Mr. Ross. It is something that the community needs to come to help us with this. It isn't just something that we own during the school day. Children are only in school 23% of the time. And so we know we need to work with the community. We are going to engage many others. We just had a meeting this week with some of our community partners in the African American community to look at what can we do. And it's not just with boys, it's with young girls as well. It is straight across, but it's a community issue.
You know, in regards to, you know, the restorative practices piece, I really think that, again, young people somewhat being at the table with that makes sense, because the whole piece about restorative practices is really about relationships and understanding, helping people understand how their decisions impact their community, in this case, community being school, but obviously it can bleed over into the community as a whole. So I think, and the reason I think it's important, again, for young people to be involved, because what we want them to, and I think we talked about this yesterday, maybe instilling these practices at an early age so people sort of grow into it naturally and it becomes part of who they are. Because with something like that, that's focused on relationships and me understanding how what I do affects the community, if I don't own that, then the only reason I'm not going to do is because of punishment, which is obviously what we're trying to get away from. So, again, I just think it's really, really important as we move forward that somehow young folks are integrated into this so they can have a sense of ownership, so we can really develop a leadership culture amongst the student body so they can sort of lead and model that way, as opposed to us as adults just saying, hey, these are the things we're doing now, and I just don't know how successful we're going to be with that, continuing to do it that way.
I agree. I've actually met with, 2 weeks ago, I met with a group of young ladies from Alger, modeled after the program that we saw Ms. Slade in Wyoming. So we started with a group of 6 young ladies that we're working with to start that focus group. We also, just today I met with 7 young men from Ottawa Hills High School because we are beginning to ask the question. And we know the tipping scale is 30%. If we can get 30% of the students to buy in, right? So we know that, we know where we're going. So we are starting that conversation with young people to find out what does it take to get that tipping scale to turn this around.
I have been prompted to remind us about the time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good, thanks.
Back to my-
But we should, this has been a great,
So subtle. Exactly.
that was Teresita who interrupted you, just want you to know that, okay. Teresita Long.
And who was prompting you?
So we will come back, and it would be, and we'll just plan to spend a lot of time delving into the statistics, and I think that, I mean, this is a great conversation, and so PBIS, sort of the stuff that you're doing, I mean, it is a way as adults responding to kids, and so, and what we need, and that's, you know, the only ones that we get to control.
Part 2, as
yes.
our report, is to provide you with an update in regard to the restructuring of our special education programs and services for next school year. What we attempted to do was ensure that we were in full compliance with state and federal state laws, rules, and regulations, and our Kent ISD plan. We're looking for improved student outcomes, increased participation of students in general education settings, because this is another area where the state performance plan shows Grand Rapids to be below the target for participation in general education. We're also looking at cost containment, being cost effective, and aligning with Transformation Plan 3.0. So we conducted a series of activities, consulting with ISD, consulting with the State Department, consulting with advisory groups, our staffs, et cetera, and very importantly, conducting individual student reviews, student record reviews as to where our students are, where could they be, how much are we including, not including, how are they doing on state and district-wide assessments, et cetera. What we discovered as part of that is that it does appear that we have been over-servicing our students, especially in our classrooms for students with cognitive impairments. And also, we have been overutilizing, if you will, non-mandated aids, and not necessarily getting the results that we thought we might get. Some of that, I believe, is the impact of the residual from the ARA funding from a few years ago, where money came into the system, and what to do with the money, and I think it went for personnel, and then the money went away, and the personnel didn't go away, okay?
So are you saying then that extra personnel didn't necessarily pay off in terms of the outcomes?
We have not seen over time that impact as far as our graduation, suspension, expulsion, dropout, and achievement scores. And this is particularly at the secondary level, that's where those supports were increased. We also discovered that our IEPs weren't necessarily being individualized. Folks jumped right from an initial referral to special education right into a categorical classroom, which pretty much tracks that student into a non-diploma and into a certificate of completion. They don't have access then to the general curriculum. And research is very clear that when students have access to the curriculum, they tend to do better in all ways, versus, again, being in a more segregated type of setting. We're underutilizing our resource teachers. There was a decision made that, particularly at the elementary and K-8s, that resource teachers would only work on academics. So if you had a student that had some kind of a social, emotional, behavioral issue, that student was in their neighborhood school with just receiving school social work, and if that didn't work, then they would jump right into a categorical classroom for students with emotional impairments. So we were seeing packed houses in our EI classrooms versus trying to support the students in the homeschool with the resource support and social work and whatever else we might need to do. We saw a reduction in our student population, but not necessarily a reduction in staff numbers. Lack of consistency, and some issues with our suspension and expulsion. And then, of course, we took into consideration building closures and certainly latched on to the K-8 philosophy, where we are seeing across the district improved academic achievement and a better social milieu for students. As we looked at our center programs, because remember, we are the operating district for all 20 school districts for various center-based programs, we saw, again, overstaffing according to our Michigan administrative rules for special education, specifically in our classrooms for moderately cognitive, for students with moderate cognitive impairments, and particularly those students in the 17 to 26-year range. The rules allow us to have one teacher for every 30 students, as long as we have a paraprofessional for every 10 students. So you can have 30 students with one teacher and 3 paras, right, for 4 staff. We have been servicing those students at that level at a 15-to-1 teacher ratio, and then also having 2 employment training specialists. Okay? And these students, by the time we're at 17 to 26, they're out in the community. They really need, again, that employment training component, not necessarily a teacher in front of the classroom type of component. So we're looking at revising and reviewing that model as far as the caseload. We had the closing of Wellerwood Early Childhood, the merging of KEC Mayfield and Oakley into a K-8. We continue to struggle with an increasing number of students with ASD that present with challenging behaviors. And that is certainly putting a stressor, if you will, on our Lincoln School and our KEC programs as far as the programming for these students. The local districts tend to keep these students in their local programs, and then by the time they get to middle school, high school, then they make a referral to our center programs when they're getting larger and their behaviors are more challenging in regards to the school setting.
What's ASD?
I'm sorry. Shame on me. Autism spectrum disorder. 1 out of 88 kids currently are being identified within that spectrum. And it just is, continuing. We have over 15,000 students with ASD, with autism, identified and eligible for special education in the state of Michigan. And we actually have a lower percentage ISD-wide than other ISDs. It's like a 7% incidence rate in other ISDs, and we're about a 5.3%. So there also was a center program study conducted last year, and a center program advisory was put together, and we've been using that advisory group for support. We've also been really pushing on least restrictive environment and asking for outlying districts and our own district that sends students to center programs to consider, can these students' needs be met in their neighborhood school? And lo and behold, that has had an impact with our students with physical impairments, that their needs can be met in multiple settings. They don't have to get on a bus and come to Grand Rapids or go to Kenosha to have those services available. We've also been listening to parents' recommendations and feedback, and we also have a work group for Kent Education Center, which houses our students with severe emotional impairments. All of that, and lots of time as I recuperated now, allowed us to then make recommendations in regards to our classroom projections for next year. That's in your packet. Exhibit A shows where we intend to have classrooms, special education classrooms, in our elementary and K-8s, in our secondary schools, and in our center-based programs. You also have a chart, a worksheet that shows the 2012 special ed classroom, so that you can kind of see the difference. Some changes include increase in resource teachers at the K-5, K-8. We will be ensuring that we're providing support early on for students so that they don't have to go to a more restrictive setting. And also, we are charging our resource teachers to facilitate the student success teams in the buildings, and that is a process that has becoming consistent over the years as to how it's implemented. And we do have a group that will be, that is developing that, and that will be rolled out in August. This shows a reduction of about 80 FTE in special education for fall 2013. You also have additional
80?
sheets, 80,
80 FTE.
80. In your packet, you will see a summary sheet for our local programs. And you'll see that this includes 16.2 teaching positions. And you can see that the types of teachers that are being reduced. It also includes 16 paraprofessional FTE. No childcare workers are being reduced, and then other is 10.1, and you see a breakout there of what other includes, which does include administration, some secretaries. Again, we're looking at closing of buildings, remember, and being able to consolidate some of the programs and services in a more cost-efficient and, we think, higher quality way. The second sheet shows our center programs. And it shows it by program or by building. And where you see the highest reductions are at the KEC programs, and primarily with childcare workers. On this sheet, it's called Parapros. I prepared this for our center program advisory, and this is the way our budget sheets reflect those. But again, anytime there was any kind of a need, it's like, well, we need more childcare workers, we need more childcare workers. Became like a lot of adults and not enough students. You see very small reduction for the Kenosha Early Childhood. It's really more about secretary, and we are reducing an administrator there. Our Lincoln campus, it includes the KVO program where I talked about the change in the MOSI model. The oral deaf program, it's again a secretarial and some other little pieces. The physically impaired program, for being as small as it is, you see that's quite a reduction. We do see 3.33 teacher FTEs and 3 parapros being reduced, and then we also then see an accompanying reduction as far as the speech and language support and the physical therapy and occupational therapy and such. And then visually impaired, no changes, and there is currently a study looking to see whether there should be a consolidation of our visually impaired teacher consultants and orientation and mobility specialists with a group from Kent ISD. But that group is staying steady at this point. So that's a very quick and dirty, if you will, review of the restructuring that we're proposing for special education classrooms. We're feeling very confident that we've included different groups in this conversation, and that this will result in more effective and economical and high services for students. The third part of our report is in regards to questions that have come to this group in regards to classrooms for students with emotional impairments.
So, before we move
Okay.
on, are there any questions about this last part in terms of changes?
No, not for me.
This to me seems like, I hope I'm characterizing this appropriately, but that the outcome of your restructuring of special education since you came on board, your analysis of what was here and the restructuring of what you think needs to be here, is that fair? I mean, to put it all on you, but is that a fair analysis of what this is in relationship also with this transformation plan and other changes?
Wasn't done as an individual. Is that, was
Well,
that
under
your
your
question?
measurship, it seems like
Yes,
it seems like.
But it was a comprehensive, inclusive
Right.
process. I guess I want to emphasize that.
Yeah.
That I didn't go off into the hospital setting or whatever and determine what needed to happen, that it was truly.
Oh, no,
Yeah, yeah, yes,
Okay.
sure.
It seems like what's interesting is, we did have, in relationship to the transformation plan, which we also addressed from my memory, is that there were challenges, parents challenged access to programs and services. But it sounds like, but then we responded with the final transformation plan.
Yes, you saw that we have the oral deaf program under one roof.
Right.
And we have been working diligently. We have had a very intense group of individuals working since January. Every 2 weeks, we meet.
Okay.
And we've had parent meetings.
Okay.
In fact, there's another parent meeting coming up this Wednesday, meaning tomorrow night. At Ken O'Shea, we've had staff from the other sites come for an after-school tour of the facility. We have maintained close communications with impacted staff and impacted parents. And at this point, I'm very confident to let you know that we are very much on our way to have that occur. Ann Zollner needs to take a large part of the credit as the facilitator for that process, and it's going very, very well.
No, it must be. It sounds like, so. Yeah, because those parents were pretty vocal and
We will
not hearing
be,
from them, so I'm assuming.
how shall I say this? We will be very tight at the at Ken O'Shea, but everyone is being extremely professional in keeping student interests in mind, and we'll make it work. We are making a few little architectural changes. We're adding to the parking lot. That was huge, because we do have parents that come in for parent groups and so forth. And so that is one of the things that we did take to the Facilities Committee at Kent ISD, and that has been approved, and Ken is, very much pushed for that and some other accommodations of the building. Ken has been awesome in regards to this also, just totally, totally open and accommodating and available.
Are we leaving the pool? The
Pool.
This is a casual comment. Get to me later.
The pool at this point will not be used for water for next year.
Okay.
I'll let that. Sorry,
So the storage bowl.
Which would really make it not a pool.
You're right.
Pool without
It's a great, great garage
storage bowl.
for bicycles and wheelchairs and trampolines and large bean bags. It's great, great place for that.
Okay.
There's people spinning.
Actually, we are making arrangements for our students in the physically impaired program to hop on a bus and go to Lincoln School twice a month so that they can have that opportunity to swim and be in a therapeutic pool, which is awesome, and I can attest to that when you are a student with cerebral palsy or some other physical impairment. So we will be still providing that opportunity for the students that attend Ken O'Shea that are in the PI program. That is
Okay.
it. Okay.
The part, third
May I
part.
move
Yeah,
on?
yes.
Okay. Drum roll for now classrooms for students with emotional impairments in our K-8 buildings. When we began to look at where our classrooms were and again, the transformation plan, we all agreed that attempting to have programming for our students with EI in K-8 buildings would be a goal. This includes maintaining the classrooms that we currently have at Harrison Park and expanding by 2, and then having the rest of the classrooms, 5 classrooms at Sherwood Park. You see on your sheet the high level of support that this budget includes for Sherwood. We certainly are staffing it for success. We are starting out with about 40 students at each of the 2 sites, even though there's 5 teachers. Our special education rules allow us to have 10 students at a time and 15 on a caseload. So we are starting below the state the state maximum, shall we, if you will, which allows then for growth if we need to, if we have referrals come in through the school year. Again, you see here some of the benefits that we see in regards to having these programs in K-8 buildings.
Where are you now?
Yeah.
I'm in your packet. It's part of your first sheet. So it's a Word document versus an Excel sheet.
The special
It's
classroom.
No, it's a Word doc.
Can you hold it up?
Did these get posted, Carolyn?
We have that.
All we have are spreadsheets.
You have spreadsheets. You didn't get the Word document. I'm sorry. Then you'll have to, get these and please pay close attention. You won't be able to look at it. This was included, but I think inadvertently it must have been left out of your.
Can you use the Elmo?
Yeah, help me? Oh, good, thank you. Yes, Elmo will do. Thank you for asking. Does this do anything?
Not really.
Yeah, it's probably too bright for us.
There we go, Joe. Oh, somebody dimmed the lights. Okay. Okay. Is that helpful?
I can see it.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, this was intended to be part of your packet. We are looking at both Harrison and Sherwood having 5 teachers and 5 parapros. There will be a .5, there is a decimal point, there are .5 resource interventionist that will support all students with IEPs at Sherwood, not just the students that, with EI. There will be a .5 PBIS coach that will come from that CEIS, the Significant Disproportionality Grant, that can then work with the non-special ed students to ensure a positive building environment. There will be a 1.0 school social worker assigned to those to the EI classrooms. There will also be a certified occupational therapist assistant, a CODA, that will address the sensory needs of students. We have a .25 EI teacher consultant, which will support the EI team and the administration at both buildings. We will be providing staff training and then other supports as appropriate and as identified with building administration and such. We believe that by having the EI classrooms in K-8 buildings, it allows for stability, relationships, trust, a sense of permanence for students, a higher level of supports, flexibility, fewer suspensions and expulsions, opportunity to share resources, collaborate, team. We'll get parents to connect with the building. There will be improved academic and behavior performance, additional professional development. There'll be multi-age appropriate role models. Certainly a decrease as far as students having to make transfers and transitions between buildings. There will be a consistent implementation of social skills curricula. We are looking at having shared service learning projects, and there will be an emphasis on cultural competency. This staff training at Sherwood will begin on Monday, and that's all set up. We will also have a meeting set up with parents on May 29, and then are already planning for the August open house, which is scheduled, I'm gonna say August 29, which from 5 to 6, we would invite the parents of the students in the EI classrooms, and at 6 o'clock, they would then join the rest of the open house, so that we can create a sense of connection. Now, there have been questions that have come to this group in regards to Sherwood, and so I tried to address those for you.
Real quick though, what resource interventions?
Resource interventionists were implemented in our district maybe, 3-4 years ago?
Yes, well, 3 years.
Their function and purpose was to address discipline primarily, and support special education and general education classroom teachers in the education of students with IEPs. We have resource interventionists in our comprehensive middle schools and in our high schools. So these are non-caseload resource teachers whose sole purpose is to support the educational program.
I know some practice of certain EI environments is having sort of a venting room, I guess is maybe the most politically correct way I can put that. I don't think they'd have an opportunity for such at, I don't know, will they have a designated area for?
Harrison and Sherwood?
Yeah.
Yes, they will. We, first of all, wanted to address the issue that came up as far as classroom space. And with Ken's input, we want to just reiterate that the size of an average classroom in GRPS is typically 700 to 900 square feet. Sherwood has 4,000 square feet plus in each of the pods, resulting in 1,000 square feet per classroom. We were able to have a great meeting with the building principal and have determined to use one of the pods for the EI classrooms, okay? So that they will be able to, again, do that teaming and so on. Down the road, we may reconsider that plan, but as we kick off this, the next school year, connected to those pods is a contained room, so that if there's a student that needs to have a place to address behaviors, that can be done there with self-respect and without having an audience.
Is this a change, the single pod for the EI students is?
We were vacillating between integrating an EI classroom in each of the pods
Okay,
versus using one pod for the EI classrooms.
okay.
Based on, again, feedback and input from the
Okay.
building principal, we've determined it would be best at this time to go forward with having the one pod house the EI classrooms, and then students, as appropriate, will go into their their grade level appropriate classrooms.
Can you real quick just let us know exactly who are you referring to by EI? What does that refer to? Just
Emotional impairment.
yeah, okay, but what does that mean?
It means that via a comprehensive evaluation,
Okay.
students have been deemed to have social emotional issues that impact their educational performance, and that they need support with
Okay.
those social emotional issues.
Okay.
Typically, these students are of average intelligence, but they need to have some structure and positive supports
Okay.
in order to perform.
Okay.
Simplistically, I mean, I could also give you a text
No,
at
that's fine. I
300
like that.
pages.
Lots of behaviors.
So, okay.
Okay.
Now, on that too, and they don't necessarily need to go into now, but I thought about my question when you kicked off about the disproportionality. When you talk about a comprehensive, I don't know, whatever language you use, comprehensive review of students' behavior, et cetera, I'm wondering, based on adult perception, I guess I would suspect that we may identify things that, I don't want to say label them EI, but I think you know what I'm getting at. I don't know. I suspect that our adult perception sometimes may unjustly identify a student.
That has happened, and so we try and have again, I use the word comprehensive evaluation process so that we can rule out, issues such as,
Bias.
Life sometimes tosses us lemons, and sometimes students misbehave in a very, because situationally, they're in a bad place, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have an emotional impairment. But stuff happened at home last night, they're not sure what's gonna happen tonight, and that raises their anxiety and so on, but it's very situational. They're responding in a very normal and appropriate way to a life event. So we need to ensure that we aren't identifying students as truly having an emotional impairment when there might be just some other things that are impacting their behavior that day.
One last question, with the .5s and the .25s and things like that. Primary supervision for those .5s and .25 folks, who would that fall upon?
Building administration, with support from special education administration.
So the on-site supervisor would be the building.
Yes, these students are students first and students with an IEP second. So they will belong to their school building, okay? They are subject to all rules and regulations and expectations for that particular school. There was some concern about lack of space for a sensory room. All sensory supports will be embedded within each of the classrooms. Again, I'm just reviewing some of the material that you may have received or that folks have come to this table expressing concerns about that student placement should be as close as possible to the child's home. Well, we offer a full continuum of educational options for students as required by law. And the IEP teams must always consider placement of students in their home school. But when it's deemed that it's not appropriate, that supports can't be provided there, then we clearly look at categorical options. If they need a higher level of support, up to and including placement in a center-based program. We're parents consulted. We can't do any of this without parents being invited to be participants at the IEP, the Individualized Educational Program team meetings. Will Sherwood be at capacity? Well, consultation with Ken and with Susan Heinig indicate that the building can accommodate projected students as a 2-section K-8 school, but we will certainly continue to monitor that. Why didn't we look at another K-8, specifically Dickinson or Ford? Well, Dickinson and Ford will become K-8s, pre-K-8s, okay? And they will house preschool classrooms, and as such, those buildings will be at capacity as far as the pre-K classrooms and then being a 2-section K-8 school. Okay? What about the open space? You know, that's so disruptive for general ed students. What will it be like for students with EI? Well, we recognize that the open space could provide a challenge or it could provide an opportunity. And so we will be very intentional, right from the August open house, etc., that we will need to emphasize how you behave in this kind of a setting. Most of us in our work settings, my work setting, I'm in a cube. You know, chances are that many of us work in open environments, and it's important to address that. And again, just teach appropriate behavior and respect for your colleagues and others. And again, there will be access to adjoining rooms, you know, for those students that at any one time might require that kind of thing. So that's some of the questions that came up. You may have other questions, or you are looking at your clock and wondering when was
because we have one more topic.
I'm
No.
looking at the clock.
Yeah, and we got stuff. To me, it sounds like you've been very thorough at responding to some of the issues, and it sounds like that again, you know, the team has made changes based on the reflection and interaction that people have had from the staff, and so I definitely applaud that. So.
Nice work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you still, that Chair Cedar, that Word document that was left out, could you email that to us?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Will that be included in the minutes? Can we do it that way? Is that acceptable?
Yeah, yeah, and I'd like to make sure that the, actually, it'd be nice if that is, because that's kind of an FAQ at the end, it'd be nice if that got
I can
distributed to the
I
rest
can
of the
do
board
it
because,
as soon as I get
yeah.
back to my queue.
Okay, yeah, because the
The
rest of the
open
board
space.
has had all of that correspondence,
Perfect.
and we should make sure that we see that, so.
Oh, gee, thank you. Really, I can do it.
All right, so we're gonna do teacher evaluation probably for the last time for now. And we'll make a goal, even though we've made our guests sit for longer, then we'll still make a goal of 6 o'clock-ish as our in points. So,
Good afternoon.
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 We'll make it exciting, so.
Okay. Yeah.
I will. Actually, because it is an update, I do just have a very short
Yeah.
update, and then David's going to spend
Okay.
most of the time. So the quick update I want to provide is we're nearly completed with our first cycle. So it's very exciting to get to this point of the year. All our observations are completed. Teachers are meeting with principals and doing the final evaluation and the rating. And we also introduced something new this year, which is going to lead me to forecast for just a little bit for next year, and that is we are doing goal setting now. And that's why I want to just take a minute to give you just a quick glimpse of what we are planning and working on and developing for next year. This is at a conceptual stage, but we think it's good to share with you as our thought process develops. We've learned a great deal from this year. So for next year, we would really like to look at how can we be more proactive with our approach. Currently, what we do is at the end of the year, and we look back over the whole year, what we want to do is start saying, okay, this is where we're starting the year, provide teachers the data and the goal setting so you're looking ahead. And then teachers would begin the year knowing where they stand and what they need to learn and grow to reach those effective and highly effective ratings. It would also allow us to have a differentiated approach with principals to provide the kinds of support for teachers who are ineffective or minimally effective, and a little more autonomy to teachers who are effective and highly effective. So that's just a quick glimpse. But David.
So the evaluation system has been done. Observations are completed. Teachers are meeting with principals about their final evaluation that takes into account the rubric or whatever you call it. Okay, all right.
And then they get their final rating according to what the state law, which is highly effective,
Right,
effective.
okay.
Plus 4.
And so those, okay. Okay, that's good. All right.
Yeah, and I should say, having worked with a number of other districts doing this, the amount of progress the district has made within the last year is really impressive. These evaluation systems, to build something that will last, they take time. You have to get your measures in place. You have to get input from stakeholders. You have to refine your measures, and you have to refine your processes, as well as build the data management infrastructure to kind of keep track of everything. And so it's a long-term kind of growth process, and I think the district's in a really good spot. This year, having kind of introduced the evaluation measures and really focused on bringing some rigor to the classroom observation process by training principals and making sure everyone's on the same page. We too often, I think of evaluation as this kind of punitive approach and don't take enough time to really appreciate the opportunity to kind of treat it as an intervention. And that's where we see, I think, a lot of the value in it. If you think, one of the interventions that happened this year was that all principals got on the same page regarding what it means to be an effective classroom teacher in terms of what should you look for when you go into a classroom. That's huge. I mean, that you can't put a price on that. That's a huge accomplishment. And kind of bringing that process, standardizing that, streamlining it, and kind of making it part of the institutionalized behavior of the system is really important. That's kind of step one, is getting them on the same page. So it's exciting. So I digress a little bit, but I want to share with you, I was asked to talk about kind of some national trends and challenges, and feel free to interrupt me if you have specific questions at any time. Feel free to interrupt so we can get to them. Did you guys receive some reading material regarding the a while back? Okay, all right. That answers my question then.
Reading material about what?
You know, at least now it hasn't been read, so I don't remember.
Yeah, right. Just about different kind of trends that are going on in the world of teacher evaluation, some kind of recent findings and whatnot. That's of course fine. So where we kind of stand, about 4 or 5 years ago, this big push towards mandatory teacher evaluation processes kind of came into play. It really kicked in 2010. Most states in the Midwest, passed laws requiring annual teacher evaluations and requiring the use of student test scores in the process, as well as other measures. Michigan was a little late to the party, still is a little late to the party, given they haven't really published their final recommendations. But because of that, we've been able to benefit from a lot of great research that's been done over the past few years, as well as kind of learn from the experiences of some other districts across the country and states across the country who are farther along in the process. And that's valuable. I mean, I think some of the kind of key findings that we've learned in the past few years is really the importance of common sense things, like the importance of using multiple measures to evaluate teaching, not relying too heavily on a single instrument or a single process. And that was a major departure from the way evaluations have been done in the past, where it's often been based on just 1 or 2 observations of instruction by the principal. And that, well, classroom observations are, again, they're a very important intervention, a way for teacher and principal to sit down and have a good conversation, a rich conversation about the quality of the classroom instruction and opportunities to improve. That's not enough information to make any sort of meaningful decision. In order to really provide kind of rich feedback and direction, you have to build a body of evidence on teacher performance. And that requires multiple classroom observations conducted by multiple raters, different supervisors, so that over the course of a year, if you think of each observation as really a snapshot of teacher performance. And if you take multiple snapshots over the course of a year, you paint a bigger picture, a more complete picture. So that was kind of one key finding. But in addition to multiple measures, which includes classroom observations, another big one is these student surveys. The district is in a great position in that they've piloted the student feedback surveys. Did they start 2 years ago with the pilots?
Yes.
Yeah. And in the course of that time, the Gates Foundation has funded some national research that shows these student feedback surveys are strong predictors of future classroom achievement gains. So if a teacher's class reports high levels of just a rich classroom instructional environment, the teacher cares for them, the teacher keeps them challenged, and the teacher has control of the classroom management, those factors are predictive of that teacher being successful with other kids in a different year. In other words, it signals that this teacher is also having an impact on student growth, and not just the students that were surveyed, different classes of students. That's very powerful information that kind of lends itself to this notion that these student feedback surveys do tell us something meaningful. So that's, we've kind of learned that there's been a lot of challenges that have kind of been uncovered, and most importantly, just the amount of work required to pull this off, particularly as it relates to data management and pulling all the pieces together and making sure all teachers have appropriate measures. That's a huge challenge, and it's a long-term challenge, particularly as it relates to student growth. Despite the best intentions of policymakers to require, 50% of teacher evaluation results to use student growth data, the reality is within any district, just take Grand Rapids, only about 30% of teachers have assessment data that's appropriate to use for their classroom to measure their effectiveness. That's just the reality that we live in. So we have NWA, and NWA, the MAP tests are, as far as I'm concerned, the best, most precise, reliable assessments you could use. But even so, those really are only appropriate for an individual teacher's classroom, to hold that teacher accountable for growth.
Subjects.
If they're teaching a subject that directly relies to that, because teachers have to know that if they're progressing through a curriculum, the assessment's going to pick up on it. And so that's a huge challenge, and it's required a lot of rethinking, and in the process we've seen some bad decisions being made in order to meet these requirements. For example, Tennessee for a while was assigning 50% of a physical education teacher's evaluation ratings to the reading or math growth results of the entire school. That you start to see, well, how is that really measuring that individual, the PE teacher's performance? No, and it causes resentment, and it causes all sorts of issues, and that's a huge challenge I think that we're seeing right now. Is how do you overcome kind of those issues, and do so in a way that's not just spending a lot of resources and money and doing it in a way that's efficient. Because all these investments and the time and money to capture all this data come with trade-offs. I mean, it comes with a reallocation of time and resources. Which brings us to kind of where I think we're heading in this, what I would call generation 2.0 of these teacher evaluation models. I see, this first generation, these districts that were leading the pack, focused on what I would call algorithm-driven evaluation models, where we're going to collect all these measures, we're going to assign scores, and then we're going to use just a computer-based algorithm to decide on a scoring approach. And in doing so, that requires them to make sure every teacher has a whole pie, right? All these different measures that they can assign weights to and score. And I see, one of the reasons I asked if you read some of these articles, because what we're seeing in the field now is there's a little bit more move away from that, because what those approaches do is, while they're nice and they do bring some uniformity to the process, they ignore what we might think of as like the known unknowns, right? They require us to assume that what we can measure and quantify is everything that's important to a teacher evaluation process, and it somewhat sidelines a principal from bringing their own human insights into the processes, which is very important. I mean, I think managers have insights into how teachers are doing, and they have things that we, no matter what, cannot measure. A principal will know if a teacher was assigned a very difficult group of kids that particular year. A principal will know if a teacher's been diagnosed with cancer and has had just a terrible year because of or personal circumstances. A lot of that stuff, to measure that and capture that is impossible. And so what there's this push towards is let's use these data and this information to inform our decisions, but not to make our decisions for us. So we're seeing places like Boston, and other cities, particularly on the East Coast, that are collecting all this great feedback for teachers in calculating all these performance measures, but then leaving some of the judgment in terms of final ratings, giving some of that discretion to the principal, so that they have the ability to bring their own insights into the process. I think we'll see more of that in the future as we kind of uncover more of these just challenges to trying to have algorithms drive everything. I'll stop there. That was a lot. I don't know if that provoked any questions, comments, thoughts, musings.
Basic thought though, just I guess appreciating the commentary, that we definitely aren't just trying to be solely formula, based here. Definitely a human element. It's teaching obviously it's a human science, and so no, that was kind of just the biggest thing that I guess thought that was produced in the agenda. I apologize for not reading the information.
That's all right. That's all right. The other thing I would say is, and it's related to this, is districts have invested a great deal of resources in both building their data management infrastructure to gather all this disparate data, pull it together, and produce these scores. It's a huge undertaking, and they've also spent lots of money and resources on measures, on training principals to conduct reliable classroom observations, administering student surveys, testing students. We work with some clients, I won't say where, who are designing assessments from kindergarten through 12th grade in almost every class, in every subject. So music, PE, theater, to measure growth, and it's just a huge investment. In order for those investments to be meaningful and to be really worthwhile, they have to provide feedback for teachers. They can't just be used to assign a score and a rating at the end of the year. And now I think we're seeing that they're often not used, that's not happening. The feedback is given too late. The way it's put together is too complicated, and they're just not getting the value out of that investment. And that's something I know that's very important to the district, and it's why I'm excited about this potentially new approach that really does stick true to this idea. It's about improvement, and it's about feedback for improvement.
So this is going to be in terms of relationship with the district. So for student growth, the student, and this year it's 15%, and it's school-wide. How is that measured currently? I can see how it's measured. I mean, I partly understand only what my children have gone through, so I can see how the 5th grade MAP scores fit. I don't see how my daughter's 8th grade, because she has all these multiple subjects and she's not taken. So how is achievement, student growth going to be measured there? And then with that is that, what does highly effective student growth look like versus effective, et cetera?
Yeah. So, right. So the wheelhouse where we can really measure growth. You've got good alignment between curriculum and assessment, and that's as someone with training and measurement, it's something that's often overlooked. In that, if teachers don't have a roadmap in terms of a curriculum, you can't assess them and treat that assessment as valid unless those two are perfectly aligned. But in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, you have good alignment. But the further up you go, that alignment starts to fall off. Because in 8th grade, kids may be taking pre-algebra, therefore a comprehensive math assessment is not going to be the perfect assessment for kids in any individual class.
And they're also taking history.
Right.
So
social sciences, come on. I mean,
Well, I mean, but the social studies teacher is going to be assessed.
Right.
So
yeah,
I mean,
I was
and yet he's not he or she is not teaching math or reading, and
right.
so is it up to the reading teacher to pull those guys along?
I think the challenge is that's what we're trying to overcome, and we actually. It's where a lot of our thought has been in trying to figure out what is a way to do this that's fair to everyone, but that recognizes that some teachers, we just have a better signal about their performance than others, and others we don't. Now, the 15% school-wide growth is, I think, an appropriate measure. That amount kind of weight for an individual teacher. There's value to that because it emphasizes all teachers have a stake in the performance of the overall school. But you don't want to go above 15%. You don't want to go above using, I think, 15% school-wide for an individual teacher unless you can unless you're going to adopt a completely different system where everyone's working together. We have one school-wide goal, but if you want to measure individual performance, it doesn't work. So it's a process. Part of it is waiting to see what the state recommendations, their recommendations, which should be coming out soon, the Governor's Council on Educator Effectiveness. And hopefully along with that will come some resources and tools to help solve some of those issues. But a nice thing is we have, with the student feedback surveys, which have not only measures of classroom instructional quality, they also have great measures of student engagement and other aspects that are kind of intermediate outcomes. In fact, if you want to understand kind of the sources behind the disciplinary issues and whether it's teachers' perceptions of students and students' perceptions of teachers, the tripod is the perfect data to investigate that. But that gives us the tripod is another measure to support that process in absence of test scores.
Actually, is there a way, I mean, I know that Teresa is gone, but is there a way that we can connect that data to her data, the discipline data? It would be great to find that out.
You couldn't do it at the student level, but you could look at patterns
at the school level, which is what the questions were, so what's happening at the school level.
That may take us a little bit, just because we haven't done that yet. Actually, when the special ed conversation was going on, David leaned forward and whispered that to me. So.
We haven't done the tripod surveys yet? Or?
Oh, no, we've done them, but we have not correlated the data that, so we need to learn to do it.
Yeah.
So give us a moment to learn it and then
Yeah,
bring it.
sure.
That's all I'm asking for. Give me some time to learn.
I'm not asking for a report.
So the tripod survey, we focus heavily on these 7 C's, which look at classroom instructional quality, but it also asks kids to reflect on their own behavior. It provides all sorts of information on their home circumstances, what they're due after school, which is critical, because what the tripod survey, as what good surveys do, is they ask, before kids judge other people, they have to reflect on their own performance and their own engagement. So you can understand their engagement. We know engagement is strongly correlated to disciplinary issues. But then you can also triangulate it with the teacher survey, which asks questions about the orderliness of the school environment, the safety of the school environment, the behavior of students and their perceptions of students' engagement. I think you'd find any hypotheses that we have, there'd be data in there that we could kind of look at to see what's going on.
Interesting. One question, I'm clear on understanding the school-wide 15% sort of student growth thing. Is that our formula just for next year? I know we have some contingencies here with what's going on with the state and all that, but I guess what I'm trying to determine, outside of that school-wide growth, is there Dr. Baker's individual students that he teaches, is there any student growth that impacts his evaluation?
Not this year.
So that's something we're still kind of deliberating how to accommodate that. I will say, just speaking for myself, if it were up to me, what I would do is just, instead of trying to pretend all teachers have the same measures and that we know we have the same reliability and validity in terms of our understanding of teachers' performance at all grades and in all subjects, just appreciate that for some teachers we have a lot more information and others we don't. And for teachers who we don't have information on, essentially we don't have a strong enough body of evidence accumulated to make strong statements one way or the other about how they're performing. Policymakers don't like to hear that, but I'll tell you, if you come from you take like a medical perspective that says, when you're designing a screening and evaluation tool, you're looking at 2 things: the number of false positives and the number of false negatives. Essentially, the number of teachers you would be, or patients you would be misclassifying. If we use that lens and think about teacher evaluation, systems that kind of require us to just assign certain weights and make kind of not great decisions will increase false positives and false negatives. So a false positive would be where you label a teacher who's truly ineffective as effective. A false negative is where you label a teacher who's truly effective as ineffective. And both those have serious, important, real consequences for teachers and for students. Our perspective is to try to reduce those as much as possible. And what that means is, if you don't know, if you have uncertainty about teachers because they're not working in a tested subject, you don't have assessment data, you can't say one way or the other. And so you have to make an assumption about how they're performing. The conservative assumption would be just to assume they're more likely to be average.
Yeah. So for this coming year, the student growth data is only school-wide. There won't be any student growth data for individual teachers that are part of the evaluation.
For this school year that we're ending right now.
Okay, but for next year,
The state determines it.
may determine that, but as of now, okay.
Well, the state in the law, it already says 25%.
Oh, and
Is-
Next
So-
year will be, but
25.
25% individual or 25%?
That is what I still need to get clear on as well.
Okay.
And we're waiting to see what the Governor's Council comes out, the MCEE.
And hopefully they'll provide some tools. I mean, they have to provide a statewide student-teacher link verification system. We have just internally at BASIS, we have a policy. In order to produce classroom-level growth results for a teacher, whereby 2 students can shift the teacher's results. They're kind of noisy, they bounce around. Teachers have to have the opportunity to verify that the students that we're saying they taught, they actually taught. They actually have to go to a screen, and that's a function the state should, it's a tool that they should provide, and I think they're working on.
So then you get into excessive absenteeism and everything else then. I mean, if I'm held accountable for skipping Maureen over here, and she's not in the school, yeah, but okay, I got you.
She left a hospital bed to get in today. Come on.
They're fading fast.
Jeez.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
So the surveys sound very, very useful in lots of ways, and actually, I mean, we're fortunate to have the board members that were here at that time to have a pretty good introduction to the tripod surveys. And they sound like something, I mean, so the teacher and the student, so it makes sense. Then the observations are very key. And this is, and I'm also anticipating questions that we're gonna get. So multiple administrators are doing the observations, okay, and multiple times.
And when you say multiple, I'm gonna say probably on average of 2 different,
Okay,
I don't wanna be misleading, like there's 4 different observers. And I'm not gonna say every teacher had different, multiple observers. But where there were indications of minimally effective, that's when we brought in another observer.
so if an administrator did minimally or ineffective, then a second administrator for sure did, okay, so there may not, so the highly effective teachers may not have gotten a
2
second.
different.
Okay.
They got a second observation, but not necessarily by a,
Second administrator, okay, I
Correct.
see. So for anyone that alleges that they had an administrator who didn't like them, there would have been a second, okay. Okay, so that's important to know. So I think that we might hear from people, so.
Yeah, and that tripod data becomes useful then too. You know, tripod wasn't used this year, but it does provide a validation or a verification.
Oh, tripod wasn't.
On principal observation results.
Well, the other thing it seems like tripod would correlate well with would be this Danielson rubric, because it seems like that does a good job of measuring this engagement and the teacher engagement with both the content, the students, et cetera, but then the survey does as well. So the tripod surveys done this year or no?
yes, there were
So
2
tripods
student
were done in
surveys
all?
and 1 teacher.
Right,
So
and-
they were administered, what David was saying is that we did not use the tripod survey results as part of the calculation of the rating.
Oh, I see.
For this year. We had promised teachers that it would be kept confidential.
Okay,
So the only people who had access to the student survey was the teacher. No one else in the district had access to that.
okay, so that would be obviously this intervention.
We
Right.
wanted to grow. So
Okay,
let's
right.
try it where it's confidential, and
Okay.
now we'll grow next year and use it in a more meaningful way.
Okay, okay.
And then also, I should say, the teacher feedback survey is very useful for principal evaluation processes, which we haven't gotten into, but it's got good measures of kind of instructional leadership, and the extent to which the principal is applying some pressure, some focus on instruction, what we call kind of academic press or instructional press. So there's use in thinking through that as well.
Well, that's been great. I think we've learned a lot about this.
Thank you.
Probably close. All right, thanks a lot.
Have a good evening.